If voters preferred Labor's policies on pocketbook issues, and apparently they did, why did they refuse to vote for Labor on Election Day? American liberals don't want to ponder that question or consider its implications for them and the 2020 election. Time magazine spoke for many on the left when it ran a piece entitled, "Does the UK election hold lessons for the Democrats?" Not exactly, experts say. In other words, say the experts, stop thinking so much. Everything is fine. And by the way, anyone who disagrees with that is a racist. Okay. But before we move on to the next topic, let's hear from someone who might know the answer. A lifelong Labor voter who decided to reject the Labor Party this year. His name is Paul Embery. He's a fireman from London and a longtime union activist. Embery just wrote a fascinating article explaining why Labor lost, his party, why he didn't vote for them this time. As you listen to these quotes, ask yourself if any of this sounds familiar to you as an American. Embery begins by pointing out that last week's election results may have shocked the media, but they, quote, come as no surprise to anyone who was paying attention and wasn't blinded by ideology or fanaticism. Some of us had long warned that working-class voters across post-industrial and small-town Britain were becoming increasingly alienated from the party, but we were banging our heads against a brick wall. The woke liberals who now dominate the party didn't listen to us. They believed that constantly hammering on about economic inequality would be enough to get Labor over the line. In doing so, they made a major miscalculation. They failed to grasp that working-class voters desire something more than just economic security. They want cultural security, too. They want politicians to respect their way of life and their sense of place and belonging, to elevate real-world concepts such as work, family, and community over nebulous constructs like diversity, equality, and inclusivity. By immersing itself in the destructive creed of identity politics and championing such policies such as open borders, Labor's placed itself on a completely different wavelength to millions across provincial Britain, without whose support it simply could not win power. In the end, Labor was losing a cultural war that it didn't even realize it was fighting, end quote. Embery could be writing about the United States. Replace Labor with Democratic Party, and you'd never know he was referring to a foreign country. It sounds exactly like what's happening here. Embery goes on about what must be done to fix his party. Quote, if Labor is to again be the party of the working class, it must undergo radical surgery. It must somehow rediscover the spirit of early Labor tradition that spoke to workers' patriotic and communitarian instincts and offered them a natural home. It must exploit that sweet spot in British politics that marries demands for economic justice with those for cultural stability. It must move heaven and earth to reconnect with voters in Britain's hard-pressed post-industrial and coastal towns who looked on bewildered as their communities were subjected to intense economic and cultural change, sound familiar, and felt that Labor was indifferent to their plight. It must rekindle a politics of belonging built around shared values and common cultural bonds. And crucially, it must be unremittingly post-liberal in perspective and policy development. But to achieve any of that, Labor must stop treating the traditional working class as though they were some kind of embarrassing elderly relative. It must learn to respect those who, for example, voted for Brexit, those who oppose large-scale immigration, those who want to see a tough and effective justice system, those who feel proud to be British, those who support the reassertion of the role of the family at the center of society, those who prefer a welfare system to be based around reciprocity, something for something, rather than universal entitlement, those who believe in the nation state and do not obsess about multiculturalism or trans rights. Such people were once welcomed by the Labor Party and felt entirely comfortable voting for it. But now, so many of the party's activists look upon these voters as if they were a different species altogether. And the price has been paid in millions of lost votes. End quote. So there you have it. Patriotic, practical, tolerant, but skeptical of change for its own sake. That's how Embery describes traditional Labor voters. He could be writing about the middle class in virtually any country in the world. Normal people are pretty much the same wherever you go.